Which is better, books or movies? Let's deep dive, shall we? So the books or movies debate has been going on since a really long time, and honestly, if you ask me, it is a very subjective decision and a very subjective choice as to what people like. It is completely their prerogative and they're entitled to their choices. But there are definitely some things which we can look at objectively. For example, there are things that books are good at objectively, and there are things that movies are good at objectively, and that is what I want to discuss today. We are not scoring any category, we are not scoring books or movies against each other. That's not what we are here for. We are just discussing certain important aspects about reading and certain important aspects about watching movies and consuming content that way, by watching, by engaging your visual faculties. So there are different things that we will talk about in this video. So let's get started, shall we? Okay, so now I think that people who like books more say that books enhance your imagination, they inculcate the sense of vivid imagination in you, and they leave space for you to imagine your characters, your scenes, your setups, your backgrounds, and the story in your own way. Books give you the space to choose how you want to see those things, how you want to experience the book. Whereas in movies, you know, it's already pre-selected for you. The background is in front of you, the characters are casted, and a certain kind of freedom and liberty is felt in, you know, imagining your own characters, in choosing how a character looks like in your own head, because that choice is made on the basis of your own assumptions and your own biases and prejudices and stereotypes, and also whatever your own knowledge base is. Whereas when it comes to movies, characters are chosen by production team, casting team, and their assumption, biases and stereotypes are taken into picture. And here, by assumptions, stereotypes, I don't mean like bad assumptions or things like racism or, you know, body shaming stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. That is included as well, undoubtedly, because those are parts of people's biases. But also like the good things, you know, when somebody says that the character smiled in a certain way, the character's eyes were in a certain way. Maybe some people have a subconscious preference towards a certain kind of beauty, and books give them the choice to actually choose their character on the basis of, you know, whatever their subjective definition of beauty is. Nobody does this consciously. Nobody goes to their subconscious brain and sits and thinks about, oh, what is my subjective definition of beauty, and who is that character who from my imagination would be who I cast as this character while reading the book. No, it's a very, very subconscious and a very automatic sort of process. But there is definitely freedom in selecting those characters and selecting the setups and the background, whereas in movies you're kind of spoon-fed. I wouldn't say that, but yeah, people do say that. We will talk about this like further in the video, why I don't think that you're technically spoon-fed, but that happens for sure, right? Things are chosen for you already in movies, and books give you the space and the freedom to imagine, to let yourself be. My personal opinion is that books also sort of, you know, give you an opportunity to discover yourself. So there are certain things that you realize about yourself while watching a certain movie as well. But you know, when you're reading a book, you're technically interacting with a text, with words, with language on a very first-hand basis, right? So while reading those things, while reading certain scenes, certain words, while being introduced to certain words, you know, in the process of like understanding those things, you discover a lot about yourself, and there are certain feelings that you are feeling, okay, but there is no, you didn't know the definition of those things until now. But when you read about a character having a certain feeling, and you realize, oh, there's a word for this feeling, and that is a way your own feeling gets validated. You feel like, oh yeah, there's a word for this, this exists, this happens, and there are other people this might be happening to. You kind of feel that belonging and that validation. This is just one example, but there are like lots of things like this that happen while reading a book. Now, talking about movies, okay, so in movies, you are watching something, okay, which is in front of your eyes, you're hearing the dialogues, maybe you're reading the subtitles at the same time, and you're not really engaging with a movie the way you engage in a book, because in a book you have to be like constantly concentrated, right? Your focus has to be on what you're reading. I mean, I cannot put a number on the amount of times I've been reading something and like I'm completely lost in my thoughts. Okay, I'm not paying attention to what I'm reading, and I have to go back 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, maybe 3 pages, and return to the last thing I remember reading, the last scene I remember imagining, and then I have to read those things again. The part where I lost focus, I have to read it again. Right? So these kinds of things happen while reading a book, because your constant focus is very important while reading a book. And in a movie, it's not exactly like that. Maybe in certain genres of movies, you need a lot of concentration, but mostly talking, that's not how movies work. I mean, you can be on your phone while watching a movie, or you can be thinking about something else while watching a movie, maybe lose a certain bit of the movie, but that doesn't really weigh onto your understanding of the concept of the movie, right? So there, while watching a movie, you have another kind of freedom to actually not pay that much attention. Now, you know what? We hear a lot of these opinions of people who like movies more, who prefer movies over books. Those people say that the people who read books and say that, oh, books help you imagine, books, develop your brain and all of that, those people are performative intellectuals. This is the kind of statement that you hear being thrown around by people who prefer movies, because they say that we're watching movies or engaging with entertainment for entertainment. It's entertainment. You don't need to study everything. You don't need to think about everything critically, and beyond a certain point, the kind of engagement that books demand becomes almost academic, and that's not what we are here for. That's not the objective. And although that opinion is correct, I do not deny that at all. I think that saying that people who prefer books are being performative intellectuals does not really have any foundation. Not in this case, at least. I do agree that there are people who are performative intellectuals, and they say they prefer books to look a certain way, to be perceived a certain way, but not all of them are like that. You have to identify. I mean, performative behavior is like everywhere today. That's a completely different thing. We can talk about it all we want, maybe in another video, but I'm saying, not like you can't bring that and completely discard the people who prefer books over movies, right? So as I said, yes, that opinion is correct, but does not apply to everybody. Now, when we talk about movies, there is this one thing that I noticed, okay? When you're watching movies or when you're reading books, essentially, if you're interpreting it like constantly, if you're engaging with it correctly, then there are things that you learn, there are things that you notice, and you become completely submerged into this world, right? What happens while reading a book is that you understand the characters' motivations, the character's mentality, the writer, the author's mentality while writing this, okay? You think about, oh, what would the writer be thinking about when they talked about this, when they wrote about this? How would have they gotten this idea? How they would have realized that this character would go on to take this action next? How they might have explored the character arc of a certain character of the story. Okay, so you are kind of into the brains of the character and the author and the writer, and you're constantly engaging with your own faculties that way. And also, while watching a movie, what happens is you're thinking about the actor and the producers and the director, okay, and how they thought while bringing this story to light, how the actor decided on a certain expression, why a certain kind of subtlety in expression would have been done by the actor in a certain particular scene. And honestly, there are times, if you notice these kinds of things in movies, there are times when you are completely mind blown by certain choices of the characters, the actions that the actors choose to do. They are so much in line with the character, and they kind of open up this completely new avenue to understand the character that the actor is playing. And that is because the actors have taken their sweet time in understanding those characters, and they have thought very diligently about the character that they are playing. The directors have have told them and introduced them to certain kinds of idiosyncrasies and quirks that the character has. And there are also certain quirks and idiosyncrasies that the actor brings on the table while performing the character. So those kinds of things are the essence of watching movies for people like me, quite honestly. There are these scenes wherein there are metaphors and there are things just happening in the background which are not like which don't take the center stage in a certain scene, but even being in the background, they make so much difference if you notice them. There's something else happening on the forefront, but the background ends up becoming the hero of the scene if you notice it, right? So honestly, if you just engage. I think engage is the word of the video, because if you engage with whatever you're doing, whether it's reading a book or watching movies, if you're engaging with it, you're going to have in-depth immersive experience, okay? And that is what art or consumption of the right kind is about, I think. So the debate, right? Back to the debate. See, when you're reading a book, you are looking at the text, you are thinking about the text and the words that you're reading, because when you read a word, there is an image in your head. What is that image? Okay, if you're a linear thinker, there's a certain kind of thought process. If you're a non-linear thinker, there's another kind of thought process. So one word can trigger so many different things in so many different people. So that's there. Okay, that is one thing. You are reading the text, you are thinking about the text in different ways, imagining things on the basis of what the text induced in your head, and interpreting that imagination eventually, right? And then coming to a conclusion of what is going on in the scene. But there is a very, very important thing that's also going on. There's your inner monologue involved in the process when you're reading a book. When you read, in your head, when you're reading, you think you're just looking at it, right? But when you look at it and it goes into your head, an inner monologue starts. You can hear yourself in your own head, and that inner monologue is developed. Like when you read, it gets developed eventually. And I think it's very important because it's a completely different experience of hearing your own self in your own head when you're reading something. That gives you a kind of distinction. Also now, while watching movies, what happens is, of course, that inner monologue is not there as much as it is there when you're reading, but your hearing faculties are included, your visual faculties are included, and your interpreting faculties are included. Now, what happens while watching movies is, even though you have already been given stuff in front of you, even when allegedly you're spoon-fed, there is still so much room for you to interpret so many different new things. And there's this subtle difference. See, when you read something, you have to do this whole process of reading, understanding, interpreting, imagining, choosing character, choosing setup, choosing background, that sometimes you get caught up in this process of just setting everything up. Your brain cycles, because you only have so much capacity to interpret in a time frame, right? So you might get caught up in this process of like constant selection, imagination. But while watching a movie, there's this one of the pros of watching the movie is that you are free. Your brain is free because you don't have to imagine anything. You just you begin at the interpretation stage, right? And what happens then is that you can actually feel the scene much more. You can feel the scene much more, and you can think about alternate possibilities if you wish to. But that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's already given to you, right? You're looking at it. You don't have to work a lot to generate that image in front of you. And so now your mental faculties are free, that after the interpretation, there's a lot more that you can think about that you might not have thought if you just read about the same thing in a book. That is one thing. Secondly, I think humans are emotional creatures. No matter how much logic you involve in everything, no matter how much you think you're logical, we are and we will be emotional creatures. Emotion sits at the very center of our being, right? And the thing is, when you watch movies, you are seeing those emotions. If you even when you write a book, you are told to write evocatively. You are told to write about different senses. You are told to write about different feelings. For example, if I tell you the food was being made, okay, in the house. When she entered the house, she saw in the kitchen and the food was being made. Or if I tell you that as she stepped her foot on the stairs of the entrance, she smelled a distinct smoky tomato smell and instantly recognized her mom's spaghetti. And she entered the house and there were sounds of water boiling and something like that. So if I talk about the same scene in the second way I did, you would feel the scene, right? For example, if I say that I just say that the bomb, like there was a bomb blast, okay, if I say there was a bomb blast, or if I say that there was a loud harrowing sound that came from the neighborhood. As she went to the window and looked outside, she saw fumes of fire, orange, as dark and as scary as death itself, or something like that, right? So there's a difference. You can see a noticeable difference. So while writing, you're also asked to write evocatively, because humans are emotional creatures. You have to include our senses. We have to include our visual, hearing, smell, nostalgia. We have to include emotions, basically. So that movies do very, very well. Movies just show you emotions, right? Because no matter how much we say that we lack empathy, and we truly, really do, but we do have a certain baseline empathy for anybody, honestly. And movies really take advantage of it in a really good way, because it makes you experience something surreal. So that is another good thing about movies. There are multiple such things which are good and bad about reading books and watching movies. We can go on, keep discussing it, but in all complete honesty, this is my opinion. There are some people who read books and watch movies purely for entertainment, and they don't really want to engage with it, and that is completely fine. As I said, it is people's prerogative. They can choose to do something if they want and not do something if they don't want. Honestly, life is really short, and if we keep judging each other on the basis of what we do in our spare time, well, we're never going to be able to solve the real problems in this world. So it's people's choice what they want to do. So, but there are people who choose to engage with it. There are people who choose not to engage with it. There are people who choose to engage with it and show that they engage with it to perform as an intellectual, be performative. And there are people who truly find fun and fulfillment in engaging with books and movies and experiencing them that way, in depth. Because honestly, depth is not for everybody, and that's not a good or a bad thing. It's all about what you have fun doing. Do you find fulfillment in not engaging? Do that. Do you find fulfillment in engaging? Do that. So it's a completely subjective choice, and I always stand for that there is no debate. Books or movies, honestly, that is not a debate. Like, having said all of that, I also do believe that critically engaging with art or entertainment is super important, because you cannot always take things in the stride of fun and entertainment and ignore the important effects that these things are having, the effects of consumption are having, right? So that's a completely another discussion. We could do it in a different video, but yeah, this was my take on the books versus movies debate. Thank you so much for watching it, and thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. It means a lot.